What's the best joke you know? I've got one. This reminds me of the man who was driving down the road and his car breaks down near a monastery. He goes to the monastery, knocks on the door, and says, "My car broke down. Do you think I could stay the night?" The monks graciously accept him, feed him dinner, and even fix his car. As the man tries to fall asleep, he hears a strange sound. A sound unlike anything he's ever heard before. The sirens that nearly seduced Odysseus into crashing his ship comes to his mind. He doesn't sleep that night, he tosses and turns trying to figure out what could possibly be making such a seductive sound. The next morning, he asks the monks what the sound was, but they say, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." Distraught, the man is forced to leave. Years later, after never being able to forget that sound, the man goes back to the monastery and pleads for the answer again. The monks reply, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." The man says, "If the only way I can find out what is making that beautiful sound is to become a monk, then please, make me a monk." The monks reply, "You must travel the earth and tell us how many blades of grass there are and the exact number of grains of sand. When you find these answers, you will have become a monk." The man sets about his task. After years of searching, he returns as a gray-haired old man and knocks on the door of the monastery. A monk answers. He is taken before a gathering of all the monks. "In my quest to find what makes that beautiful sound, I traveled the earth and have found what you asked for. By design, the world is in a state of perpetual change. Only God knows what you ask. All a man can know is himself, and only then if he is honest and reflective and willing to strip away self-deception." This is a really dumb one, but I love it. Two men are sitting drinking at a bar at the top of the Empire State Building, when the first man turns to the other and says, "You know, last week I discovered that if you jump from the top of this building, the winds around the building are so intense that by the time you fall to the 10th floor, they carry you around the building and back into a window." The bartender just shakes his head in disapproval while wiping the bar. The second guy says, "What, are you nuts? There's no way that could happen." "No, it's true," the first man says. "Let me prove it to you." He gets up from the bar, jumps over the balcony, and plummets toward the street below. As he nears the 10th floor, the high winds whip him around the building and back into the 10th floor window, and he takes the elevator back up to the bar. He meets the second man, who looks quite astonished. "You know, I saw that with my own eyes, but that must have been a one-time fluke." "No, I'll prove it again," says the first man as he jumps again. Just as he is hurtling toward the street, the 10th floor wind gently carries him around the building and into the window. Once upstairs, he urges his fellow drinker to try it. "Well, why not?" The second guy says, "It works. I'll try it." He jumps over the balcony, plunges downward, passes the 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th floors, and hits the sidewalk with a splat. Back upstairs, the bartender turns to the other drinker and says, "You know, Superman, you're a real jerk when you're drunk." Four older gents who were college buddies met for dinner for the first time in 20 years. After ordering, one of the men got up to use the bathroom. One of the men boasted about his son. "My son's so successful, he started at the bottom valeting cars, worked and saved money, and he just started his second dealership. For his friend's birthday he bought him a Maserati." All the men clapped and nodded. The next man said about his son, "My son's so smart, he started as a junior aircraft technician at a small charter, put himself through engineering, and he has his own private jet company with millions in revenue. For a friend's birthday he bought his friend a twin-engine turboprop." Again all the men wiped tears from their eyes. The third man said about his son, "My son is a hard worker, he started mowing lawns and went into trades, he is the president of a company that builds subdivisions. For his buddy's birthday he gave his friend a new house." All the men clapped and sat back enjoying their son's accomplishments. The fourth man came back, sat down, and asked why they were crying. After finding out, he said, "Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but my son's a male stripper and his birthday was last month and 3 of his clients gifted him a car, a plane, and a house." In early 20th century Ireland, a man is drinking at a bar. The barkeep informs all the patrons that it's closing time, and the man gets down from his bar stool only to fall flat on his face. The other patrons all rush to his aid, but he refuses and says, "I'll be fine if I can just make it to the door." So he crawls to the door, tries to stand up, but falls on his face again. Again the patrons try to assist him, but he waved them off saying, "I'll be fine if I can just make it to me house." His house is right next to the bar, and he crawls through the dirt to the front door, pulls himself up and falls down to the floor. A few patrons that followed him insist on helping him, but again he refuses, declaring, "I'll be fine if I can just get to me bed." So he crawls to the bed, pulls himself up, and gets in, falling asleep instantly. The next morning, the man's wife wakes him, shouting, "You were at that bar again last night, weren't ya?" "How'd you know that?" he asks. "Because you left your wheelchair there again, ya fool." Edit, to make it more sectioned. A man sat down at a bar and told the bartender, "I bet you $300 that I can piss into the cup all the way over there on the other side of the bar and not miss a single drop." The bartender said, "There is no way you can do that." "Sure, I'll bet you $300. The man then begins to undo his pants and begins pissing. He starts pissing all over the bar, spraying on the bottles and the bartender, not making a single drop in the cup. The bartender starts smiling and laughing and says, "That's it, you owe me $300. The man then gets up and walks over to the pool table and starts laughing and shaking hands with the men standing there. He walks back to bar, sits down and starts laughing at the bartender and hands him the money. The bartender asks, "Why are you laughing? You just lost the bet." The man said, "I'm laughing because I bet those guys over there $1,000 that I could piss all over you and your bar and you would still be laughing when I was done." A guy gets a tapeworm from his meal one day. He goes and visits doctor after doctor to get rid of the worm to no avail. Every doctor just dismisses him, none are able to get this thing out. He visits another doctor and finally gets a recommendation. Go and see the old doctor up the road. His methods are odd, but he always seems to get the trick done. The man, having lost all hope, goes to see the old doctor. He tells him of his issue and the old doctor tells him to come back tomorrow, and to bring an apple and a cookie. He comes back the next day with the foods, and the doctor asks the man to lean against the table. The doctor then shoves the apple up the man's ass, followed by the cookie. Shocked, the man asks why he would do such a thing. The doctor pays no mind, only to request the man repeat the request tomorrow. Having had no luck anywhere else, the man obliges. The next day, the same thing happens. Apple followed by the cookie, both shoved up the man's ass. The doctor then asks the man to bring both foods along with a hammer. The man gets very worried but thinks it can't get any worse. The third day the man braces himself. The doctor shoves the apple straight up the man's ass yet again. He grabs the hammer next, but then he waits. The man is tense, the doctor keeps still and continues to wait. All of a sudden the tapeworm sticks his head out of the man's ass. "Where the hell is my cookie?" Reminds me of the guy who got a job at the pickle factory. He came home from his first day and his wife asked him how it was. He said it was great, but he couldn't stop watching the pickle slicer. He knew it was wrong but he couldn't stop thinking about putting his penis in the pickle slicer. His wife thought that was a little bit weird. Time went on, but the woman's husband only became more withdrawn. He was obsessed. Finally she just confronted him, "Look, I can tell this thinking is eating you alive. Ignoring it isn't working. You just have to get this out of your system." Her husband croaked out, "Really? Really?" She exclaimed. "I want you to stay late after work, after everyone has left. Make some kind of excuse. Then when there's nobody else around, just go ahead and put your penis in the pickle slicer. Then you'll finally be able to move on." He silently nodded his head and left for work. All day she was thinking about her husband and the difficult time he must be having. Finally, he arrived home, a little later than usual. He slammed his lunchbox down on the kitchen table. "Well, I finally did it. I put my penis in the pickle slicer." "Really?" asked his wife. "Yes, I was thinking about it all day. Then, like you said, I stayed after quitting time and people had left. But my boss came back into the factory and caught me with my penis in the pickle slicer." A man is sitting at his favorite pub, for the millionth time, ordering beer after beer and talking with the bartender. Before he realizes it, he's had way too many to the point where he throws up on himself. "Oh fuck," he says, "my wife is going to absolutely kill me. She's already upset with how often I drink, and now look. I've gone and done it again and thrown up on myself." "Nah," the bartender replies. "Here's what you do. Take a $20 bill out of your wallet, out it in your shirt pocket, then tell your wife some other asshole at the bar got so drunk he threw up on you, and gave you $20 to get your shirt cleaned." Brilliant. The old guy reaches into his wallet and puts cash into his shirt pocket. He thinks this plan is so good that he can afford to sit at the bar a bit longer and have a few more beers. He stays until bar close, then stumbles home where he finds his wife waiting for him the second he opens the door. She immediately yells at him, "Where the hell have you been?" "At the bar again, and you got so drunk that you puked on your shirt." "No no no honey," the old man says with slurred words. "Some other jerk got so drunk he puked on my shirt. Look, he gave me $20 to get my shirt cleaned," and he hands her the cash from his pocket. My grandpa would tell this joke called the Yangtze River story. Relatives would look at me and say, "Get comfortable." He finally took the time to tell me at my cousin's wedding. There once was a family that lived on the Yangtze River. They had an outhouse right on the river, and one day, it was pushed off the bank and floated downstream. The father of the family lined up his 3 sons. Young, teen, and almost adult, they lined up, facing where the outhouse used to be. The father asked the boys one by one, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The youngest turned his head to the left, staring at the house they all lived in. It was a big red house that they all worked together to paint last summer. It was cold now, with winter approaching and the paint needing another coat soon. The father went to the next boy, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" This son looked straight up, swallowing hard so that his throat made an audible sound. Finally, he asked his eldest on, "Did you push the outhouse into the Yangtze River?" The boy locked his father's gaze, but declared, "No, I did not." The father pulled out a pastry from the nearby village. "I am going to tell you a story. And by the end, you will tell me who pushed the outhouse into the river." The boys all fidgeted, but were ready to hear their father's story. One day, a little boy chopped down his father's cherry tree. Instead of lying, he told the truth, and his father rewarded him, gave him candy, and he grew up to be George Washington, the President of the United States. A lizard is walking through the jungle and spots a monkey up in a tree smoking a joint. "Hey monkey, what are doing?" he says. The monkey says, "I'm up here getting high AF man. Come on up." The lizard goes up in the tree and they smoke a few joints, and the lizard says, "Man, I'm thirsty as hell, I am a head down to the river and get a drink of water." The monkey says, "All right man, be careful." The lizard makes it down to the riverbank and goes to get himself a drink and falls into the river and starts to drown. Meanwhile there is a croc on the other bank, sees the lizard in trouble and jumps in and saves his life. The croc says, What the hell, lizard, what happened? The lizard tells him about the monkey and the joints they were smoking, and the croc says, I'm gonna go find this monkey and tell him off for this. After he says that, he takes off, and as the croc is walking through the jungle calling out to the monkey and the monkey hears him, looks down from the tree and says, holy shit man, how much water did you fucking drink? A hotel in the Soviet Union. A room for four with four strangers. Three of them soon open a bottle of vodka and proceed to get acquainted, then drunk, then noisy, singing, and telling political jokes. The fourth guy desperately tries to get some sleep. Finally, in frustration, he surreptitiously leaves the room, goes downstairs, and asks the concierge lady to bring tea to room 67 in 10 minutes. Then he returns and joins the party. 5 minutes later, he bends to a power outlet, Comrade Major, some tea to room 67, please. In a few minutes, there's a knock at the door, and in comes the concierge lady with a tea tray. The room falls silent, the party dies a sudden death, and the prankster finally gets to sleep. The next morning he wakes up alone in the room. Surprised, he runs downstairs and asks the concierge lady what happened to his companions. You don't need to know. She answers. But what about me? Asks the terrified fellow. Oh, you, well. Comrade Major liked your tea gag a lot. I've got some Russian Jewish jokes I don't tell in mixed company, so I'll let someone else tell them. For now, here's an oldie but a goodie. The KGB, the GIGN, and the CIA are all trying to prove they are the best at catching criminals. The Secretary General of the UN decides to set them a test. He releases a rabbit into a forest, and each of them has to catch it. The CIA go in. They place animal informants throughout the forest. They question all plant and mineral witnesses. After 3 months of extensive investigations, they conclude that the rabbit does not exist. The GIGN goes in. After 2 weeks with no leads, they burn the forest, killing everything in it, including the rabbit, and make no apologies, the rabbit had it coming. The KGB goes in. They come out 2 hours later with a badly beaten bear. The bear is yelling, okay. Okay. I'm a rabbit. I'm a rabbit. A moth goes into a podiatrist's office, and the podiatrist's office says, what seems to be the problem, moth? The moth says, what's the problem? Where do I begin, man? I go to work for Gregory Alinovich, and all day long I work. Honestly, doc, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I don't even know if Gregory Alinovich knows. He only knows that he has power over me, and that seems to bring him happiness. But I don't know, I wake up in a malaise, and I walk here and there. At night I sometimes wake up and I turn to some old lady in my bed that's on my arm. A lady that I once loved, doc. I don't know where to turn to. My youngest, Alexandria, she fell in the cold of last year. The cold took her down, as it did many of us. And my other boy, and this is the hardest pill to swallow, doc. My other boy, Grigoro Ivanilitavich. I no longer love him. As much as it pains me to say, when I look in his eyes, all I see is the same cowardice that I catch when I take a glimpse of my own face in the mirror. If only I wasn't such a coward, then perhaps I could bring myself to reach over to that cocked and loaded gun that lays on the bedside behind me and end this hellish facade once and for all. Doc, sometimes I feel like a spider, even though I'm a moth, just barely hanging onto my web with an everlasting fire underneath me. I'm not feeling good. And so the doctor says, moth, man, you're troubled. But you should be seeing a psychiatrist. Why on earth did you come here?